Hi, it's Walter, and I'm recording this message for Sunday, May the 31st, 2020, which means it's the 12th Sunday in a row we haven't been able to meet because of restrictions related to the coronavirus pandemic. So last week we talked about endurance and perseverance, and I built my talk around my first attempt at running a marathon 40 years ago, and I'm going to build on that talk today. And since I assume that most of you heard that talk, I'm not going to rerun it today, but I do want to give a quick recap to make sure that we're all ready to toe today's starting line together. So last week, I took you through the first 20 miles of my first marathon, and I recounted how I went from waving to the crowd and blowing kisses to Kathy and feeling like I was on top of the world as the first 19 miles clicked by. I went from that to hitting the wall, to slowing way down, to being passed by an assortment of runners and feeling like I just wanted to quit at mile 20. And I used that marathon illustration to suggest that many of us are in mile 20 of the coronavirus marathon. We've hit the wall and we may be feeling like we want to quit. So last week I encouraged us to endure, to persevere through the wall with the strength that comes from knowing that we aren't racing this race alone. Because God is with us, and Jesus is beside us, and the Spirit is within us, and the church surrounds us, so we know we're not running alone. And today I'm going to pick up my marathon at mile 21, and I'm going to tell you how I managed to make it through the wall and finish that race. And then I'm going to show how that experience provides us some valuable advice and insight as we navigate this wall and this race. So it's now mile 21, and I'm a mess. I'm tired, I'm discouraged. Sure, I've struggled in races before, but when you go out too fast in an 800-meter run and you hit the wall coming out of the final turn, you only have 100 meters to go to the finish line. But here I am. I'm not 100 meters from the finish line. No, I'm 6.2 miles from the finish line, a full 10K still to go. And 10K is the longest race I've ever run before this one. And as I'm struggling, as I'm shuffling along, it's as if there are two voices in my head having a tug of war. And one voice is urging me to quit, to fake an injury, to catch a ride back to the finish line. That voice is already providing me with a script that I need to justify my actions to myself, to Kathy, and to anyone else who might ask. But the other voice is urging me to persevere, to hang in, to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And that voice seems to have more confidence in me than the available evidence would suggest was wise. And that's where I made the first decision that eventually led me to the finish line. I decided right there to recalibrate my goals. Instead of having time goals, instead of having placing goals, I determined that my goal was going to be simply to finish. Not finish in a certain time, but just finish. Not finish in a certain place, but just finish. After all, there's no shame in finishing a marathon, regardless of your time. So I quit glancing at my Casio watch, and I gave myself permission to stop racing and start just running. And when I removed that mental burden, then my physical burden didn't seem so bad. It turned out that it wasn't that I could no longer run, it was just that I was no longer able to run fast. And that became okay. So that's the first important decision I made. I recalibrated my goals and quit racing and just started running. Well, the second important decision I made was to quit focusing on the finish line. It was counterproductive for me to be focused on something that was over 6 miles away and was out of sight. After all, to get to mile 26, I first had to reach mile 22 and 23 and 24 and 25. So I shifted my focus from the finish line to just my next step and the next step and the step after that. And before long, I was at mile 22 and then at 23. I wasn't focused on the finish line, but I was getting closer and I was feeling better about reaching my new goal. So I've recalibrated my goals, I've shifted my focus, and those two things helped tremendously. But the final decision I made was the decisive factor in finishing the race. I decided to swallow my pride. One of the things that they have in most marathons is pace groups. These groups are led by experienced runners, and they help less experienced runners like me make it through the race at a set and steady pace. So before the race starts, these volunteers are holding up signs with their particular target pace written on them. And runners who want to run that pace will join as a group to run the race together. But at the start of the race, I was having none of that. As we established last week, I was young and thin and fit and more than a little arrogant. And I wasn't going to tie my fortunes in the race to anybody else. No, I was going to conquer the White Rock Marathon on my own, which worked out pretty well for me until mile 20. And during mile 21, guess what happened? Well, one of those groups, it was a group whose pace I would have laughed at 20 miles ago. One of those groups caught up with me. And as that group started to pass me, I decided to swallow my pride and quit trying to do this race on my own. And instead, I latched on to the back of that group, and they almost literally pulled me to the finish line. It turns out that accepting help and support from others helps you get through the wall and helps you to the finish line. It turns out that having other people who are sharing in your suffering helps you through the wall and helps you to the finish line. So accepting help and support was crucial. Well, the parallels between what got me through the marathon wall and to the finish line and our current COVID marathon are probably obvious to you. But in case they aren't, here are 3 steps you can take to make it through this wall we've hit and start moving again toward the finish line. Here's step number 1. It is helpful for us to recalibrate our goals. Instead of being focused on running at a certain speed or focused on finishing with a certain style, maybe our goal needs to be just to finish, just to persevere. Just to, as Paul said, fight the fight and finish the race. After all, there's no shame in finishing this marathon regardless of your pace and your style. So let me suggest that you quit looking at your watch or your to-do list and just give yourself permission to stop racing and instead just run. And when you remove that mental burden, then your spiritual burden won't seem as bad. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised that your problem isn't that you can no longer run. It's just that right now you aren't able to run fast. I want you to know that's okay. So that's the first important decision we need to make. We need to recalibrate our goals and quit racing and just start running. Well, the second important decision we need to make is to quit focusing on the finish line. It turns out that in this race as well, it's counterproductive to be focused on something we aren't even sure what it looks like, let alone how far away it might be. So let's instead shift our focus to the here and now. Let's be present in every step of our journey. Let's not be so wrapped up in lamenting what we don't have that we lose sight of God's new mercies that present themselves every morning and every step of the way. And the truth is right now, the things we have become so focused on aren't even the finish line at all. You see, our real goal is to become like Jesus. That's the race we're running, and that's where our focus should be. This familiar verse from Hebrews has taken on a whole new meaning for me in light of our current circumstances. Listen to what it says, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. It says, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. You'll remember last week we talked about Noah and Job and Abraham. We talked about Joseph and Moses and Hannah and Elijah and Paul. All people who hit the wall in their race yet still endured to the finish line. And since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses as that, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Let's fix our eyes on Jesus. Let's shift our focus to Jesus. You know, one of the tragedies that's going on right now is that Christians seem to be focused everywhere but on Jesus. We're focused on things like mask or no mask. We're focused on, is this a hoax or is it truly a worldwide crisis? We're focused on my expert or your expert. We're focused on my party or your party. How about instead we focus on my Jesus and your Jesus? Because they're the same Jesus. You see, if we'll do that, I'm convinced that God will then carry us through the wall and all the way to the finish line. You probably remember what Isaiah promised in Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 30. He said, even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. So let's shift our focus from wherever we think the finish line is and instead place our focus on Jesus. And if we'll do that, we might just find that we are once again running without growing weary. That's the second important decision we need to make. We need to shift our focus to Jesus. Well, here's the third decision we need to make. Some of us, including me, need to decide that we're going to swallow our pride and ask for and accept help and support. We all need a pace group. We all need others to help us make it through this marathon. I know that most of us have a hard time admitting that we've hit the wall. I know I have a hard time admitting that I've hit the wall, but I want you to know I have. And I can't tell you over the last several weeks how helpful and encouraging it's been to receive your calls and your cards and your messages of support and love and concern. You see, just knowing that we aren't alone, just knowing that others are also running, just knowing that others are sharing in our suffering, just knowing that we don't have to lead the race every single day, that we can let someone else pull us along for a while. Those are the things that get us running again, and those are the things that keep us running. And that's the beauty of the church. You see, the church hasn't stopped moving, and the church hasn't hit the wall. And the church won't stop moving, and it won't hit the wall. It won't stop moving, and it won't hit the wall unless we all try to run this race on our own. So Netherwood Park, let's recalibrate our goals, and let's give ourselves permission to stop racing and instead just be present in every step of this journey. And let's take our focus off of whatever we think the finish line should be, and let's put our focus right back on Jesus. And let's swallow our pride. And let's quit trying to run through the walls all on our own. Let's instead unite together. Let's run together. Let's suffer together. And then let Jesus carry us home. And may the Lord bless us and protect us. And may the Lord make his face shine on us and give us his peace as he lifts us up in his arms and carries us home. Amen.